Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading is of Chapter 39 and a reflection on the same. Chapter 39. On November 1st, Kutuzov had received through a spy news that the army he commanded was in an almost hopeless position. The spy reported that the French, after crossing the bridge at Vienna, were advancing in immense force upon Kutuzov's line of communication with the troops that were arriving from Russia. If Kutuzov decided to remain at Krems, Napoleon's army of 150,000 men would cut him off completely and surround his exhausted army of 40,000, and he would find himself in a position of Mack at Ulm. If Kutuzov decided to abandon the road connecting him with the troops arriving from Russia, he would have to march with no road into unknown parts of the Bohemian Mountains, defending himself against superior forces of the enemy, and abandoning all hope of a junction with Boxwalding. If Kutuzov decided to retreat along the road to Krems to Omsk to unite with the troops arriving from Russia, he risked being forestalled on that road by the French who had crossed the Vienna Bridge, and encumbered by his baggage and transport, having to accept battle on the march against an enemy 3 times as strong, who would hem him in from 2 sides. Kutuzov chose this latter course. The French, the spy reported, having crossed the Vienna Bridge, were advancing by forced marches towards Znaim, which lay 66 miles off the line of Kutuzov's retreat. If he reached Znaim before the French, there would be great hope of saving the army. To let the French forestall him at Znaim meant the exposure of his whole army to a disgrace, such as that at Ulm, or to utter destruction. But to forestall the French with his whole army was impossible. The road for the French from Vienna to Znaim was shorter and better than the road for the Russians from Krems to Znaim. That night he received the news. Kutuzov sent Bagration's vanguard, 4,000 strong, to the right across the hills from the Krems-Znaim to the Vienna-Znaim road. Bagration was to make this march without resting, and to halt facing Vienna with Znaim to his rear. And if he succeeded in forestalling the French, he was to delay them as long as possible. Kutuzov himself, with all his transport, took the road to Znaim. Marching 30 miles that stormy night across roadless hills with his hungry, ill-shod soldiers, and losing a third of his men as stragglers by the way, Bagration came out on the Vienna-Znaim road at Hollabrunn, a few hours ahead of the French, who were approaching Hollabrunn from Vienna. Kutuzov with his transport had still to march for some days before he could reach Znaim. Hence Bagration, with his 4,000 hungry, exhausted men, would have had to detain for days the whole enemy army that came upon him at Hollabrunn, which was clearly impossible. But a freak of fate made the impossible possible. The success of the trick that had placed the Vienna Bridge in the hands of the French without a fight led Murat to try to deceive Kutuzov in a similar way. Meeting Bagration's weak detachment on the Znaim road, he supposed it to be Kutuzov's whole army. To be able to crush it absolutely, he awaited the arrival of the rest of the troops who were on their way from Vienna, and with this object offered a 3 days' truce on condition that both armies should remain in position without moving. Murat declared that negotiations for peace were already proceeding, and that he therefore offered this truce to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Count Nostitz, the Austrian general occupying the advanced post, believes Murat's emissary and retired, leaving Bagration's division exposed. Another emissary, rode to the Russian line to announce the peace negotiations and to offer the Russian army the 3 days' truce. Bagration replied that he was not authorized either to accept or refuse a truce, and sent his adjutant to Kutuzov to report the offer he had received. A truce was Kutuzov's sole chance of gaining time, giving Bagration's exhausted troops some rest, and letting the transport and heavy convoys, whose movements were concealed from the French, advance, if but one stage nearer his name. The offer of a truce gave the only and a quite unexpected chance of saving the army. On receiving the news, he immediately dispatched Adjutant General Wintzingrode, who was in attendance on him, to the enemy camp. Wintzingrode was not merely to agree to the truce, but also to offer terms of capitulation, and meanwhile Kutuzov sent his adjutants back to hasten to the utmost the movements of the baggage trains of the entire army along the Krim-Znaim road. Bagration's exhausted and hungry detachment, which alone covered this movement of the transport and of the whole army, had to remain stationary in face of an enemy 8 times as strong as itself. Kutuzov's expectations that the proposals of capitulation, which were in no way binding, might give time for part of the transport to pass, and also that Murat's mistake would very soon be discovered, proved correct. As soon as Bonaparte, who was at Schönbrunn, 16 miles from Hohenbrunn, received Murat's dispatch with the proposal of a truce and a capitulation, he detected a ruse, and wrote the following letter to Murat. To Prince Murat, I cannot find words to express to you my displeasure. You command only my advance guard, and have no right to arrange an armistice without my order. You are causing me to lose the fruits of a campaign. Break the armistice immediately, and march on the enemy. Inform him that the general who signed that capitulation has no right to do so, and that no one but the Emperor of Russia has that right. If, however, the Emperor of Russia ratifies that convention, I will ratify it. But it is only a trick. March on. Destroy the Russian army. You are in a position to seize its baggage and artillery. The Russian Emperor's aide-de-camp is an impostor. Offers are nothing when they have no powers. This one had none. The Austrians let themselves be tricked at the crossing of the Vienna Bridge. You are letting yourself be tricked by an aide-de-camp of the Emperor. Napoleon. Bonaparte's adjutant rode full gallop with his menacing letter to Murat. Bonaparte himself, not trusting to his generals, moved with all the guards to the field of battle, afraid of letting a ready victim escape, and Bagration's 4,000 men merrily lighted campfires, dried and warmed themselves, cooked their porridge for the first time in 3 days, and not one of them knew or imagined what was in store for him. Alright, that concludes my reading of chapter 39, and here is my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, Day 39, on miracles and mistakes. In the Father Brown story, The Blue Cross, G.K. Chesterton writes that the most incredible thing about miracles is that they happen. Lucky it is for Kutuzov and the Russian army, then, that sometimes they do. Otherwise, I think, this novel we're reading would be more novella than prose epic. At the beginning of today's chapter, we learn that the French are quickly closing in on the entire Russian army. Kutuzov is presented with 3 unpalatable options, each of which seems to end with a decisive French victory and a Russian humiliation. He makes his decision. He decides to send Bagration's vanguard to confront the approaching French army on the Vienna-Znaim road with orders to forestall the French advance for as long as possible. It's long odds. Bagration is vastly outnumbered. The idea, though, is that Bagration's agitation of the French army will allow Kutuzov the time and opportunity to unite with more troops arising from Russia. And then, the miracle. Murat, leading the French advance guard, mistakenly believes that the entire Russian army is approaching, and that Bagration's troops are just the first to arrive. If, as Murat assumes, the entire French army is marching forward, then he can wait until they are all crossing the Vienna Bridge, and he can crush them all at once. So he offers a 3-day truce on the condition that Bagration makes no move. The idea is that this will allow the rest of Kutuzov's army to catch up, and then Murat can attack and end the Russian rebellion with one swift Tarquinian stroke. Bagration, on Kutuzov's orders, accepts these terms. Kutuzov in turn orders his troops to speed up their retreat. It's starting to look as if they might get out of this alive. Meanwhile, Napoleon learns of Murat's decision and, sensing the Russian ruse, directs Murat to abandon the truce and attack immediately. Let's temporarily detach ourselves from our Russian sympathies and instead unite them with the French. Consider Murat. Here we have a man entrusted with great responsibility concerning the French campaign against the Austrians and the Russians. Though a dash of nepotism certainly played a role in his elevation to his position, he was, after all, brother-in-law to Napoleon. By all historical accounts, his military service merited such promotion, and in this chapter he acts faithfully to his cause. Given all relevant information, he makes a decision he believes will result in French victory. Of course, as Napoleon is able to discern, the decision is a blunder. But like Othello taking Iago's counsel, Fredo working with Gianniola, or that time I decided to get onto the miraculously empty subway car during rush hour, we all make mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable, and we must learn how to properly respond to the misjudgments we make in life. Daily Meditation. Do not be disgusted, nor discouraged, nor dissatisfied, if thou dost not succeed in doing everything according to right principles. But when thou hast failed, return back again to be content if the greater part of what thou doest is consistent with man's nature, and love this too which thou hast returned. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. Alright, so that concludes today's reading of chapter 39 and a reflection on the same. Thanks for joining me and listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can either do so by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation to PayPal. The links to all that are below. Tomorrow we will be reading and reflecting on chapter 40 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and of others.